Good morning, America. Welcome to your always reliable news TV program. Today we will be looking at some events related to the civil rights movement. Yes, as you heard, the first one we will talk about is the Brown versus Board of Education. The case originated in 1951 when the public school district in Topeka, Kansas refused to enroll the daughter of a local black resident, Oliver Brown, at the school closest to their home, instead of requiring her to ride a bus to a segregated black elementary school farther. Unlike school districts of other states involved in the combined case, in Topeka the lower courts, while still requiring certain remedies, had found that the segregation schools were substantially equal with respect to building, transportation, curricula, and educational qualifications of teachers. Hence, with the involvement of the Kansas case in the Supreme Court's findings specifically hanged up in the matter of segregation. The Browns and 12 other local black families in similar situations then filed a class action lawsuit in U.S. federal court against the Topeka Board of Education, alleging that its segregation policy was unconstitutional. A three-judge panel of the U.S. District Court of the District of Kansas rendered a verdict against the Browns, relying on the precedent of the Supreme Court's 1896 decision in Plessy v. Ferguson, in which the court had ruled that racial segregation was not itself a violation of the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause if the facilities in question were otherwise equal, a doctrine that had come to be known as separate but equal. The Browns, then presented by NAACP Chief Counsel Sir Bob Marshall, appealed to the Supreme Court, which agreed to hear their case. The court's decision in Brown partially overruled Plessy v. Ferguson by declaring that the separate but equal notion was unconstitutional for American public schools and educational facilities. It paved the way for integration and was a major victory for the civil rights movement and a model for many future impact litigation cases. So I think that would be. Wait a second. Yes. Okay, looks like we got some more news about civil rights movements. Could you help me out, Jorge?
Now I'm going to talk about Rosa Parks. In August of 1955, the Emmet Till case incredibly saddened Rosa Parks, and on Thursday, December 1st of 1955, she boarded the bus in downtown in Montgomery and sat down in the first row of the seats that was only reserved for black people, the so-called color section, as one would say. The bus began to fill up, and soon the driver asked the black passengers to give up their seats, while the white people moved to the front of the bus and the black people moved to the back. Rosa Parks continuously refused to stand up and give up her seat, and after her arrest and release, the members of the NAACP started to plan a bus boycott. Rosa Parks was found guilty on trial. However, she decided to take a stand and appeal her conviction, thereby challenging racial segregation through legal means. The boycott continued, and a new group was formed to continue leading it. The name of the group was Montgomery Improvement Association, as someone would call it, or the MIA, and first president was Martin Luther King Jr. It's a cool coincidence. The actions of Rosa Parks played an enormous role in the fight for civil rights. She was a model citizen, employed, married, and a well-versed in politics person, which made her the perfect choice for the attempt to fight segregation laws. Her actions helped raise international awareness of racism in the United States. But thank you so much. Anyways, I'm going to pass the microphone to Omar.
Thanks, Jorge. Now I'm going to talk about the Emmet Till case. Emmet Till was a 14-year-old African American. On August 24 of 1955, the young man visited a store in the town where he lived, where he saw the cashier Caroline Dunham. What happened in between them is unclear, but when Roy Bryant, the husband of the employee and owner of the store, returned to the business, he was told that the teenager had flirted with his white woman. 4 days later, he left with his half-brother, Milana, to the house where Emmett was staying. They both parked him into a car and took him to a river where they beat him, shoved him in the head, and threw him into the water. He was found dead 3 days later by some fishmongers. They were then brought to trial where they interrogated the attacker, but there were no charges and they were rearrested. Basically, because it was a white court and they supported their own. In those days, there were a very big racial problems. That's why they hadn't done anything to them. And thanks by the case of Emmett Till, and among other things, blacks fought for their rights. They made them listen because they couldn't treat them like garbage.
Thank you, Omar. Now on the Little Rock Nine case. The Little Rock Nine was a group of African American high school students who challenged racial segregation in the public schools of Little Rock in Arkansas. During 1957, the Little Rock Nine groups was enrolled at Little Rock Central High School, which until then had been all white students. They were supported by the U.S. Supreme Court after the Brown versus Board of Education case that declared segregating schooling to be against the law. On the second day, they encountered a large white mob in front of the school, who began shouting, throwing stones, and threatening to kill the students. In addition, about 220 soldiers of the Arkansas National Guard were sent to help. The confrontation in Little Rock drew international attention to racism and civil rights in the United States, as well as to the battle between federal and state power. In 1958, the governor closed the Little Rock schools and reopened them in 1960 with a desegregated student body in order to avoid any further abuse. Thank you for watching our news. We hope you enjoyed and learned more about the civil rights movement on the United States. Thank you.